morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for the Laguna Woods Democratic Club to be back with you. And this morning, we have another super exciting speaker. Before we start to talk to Reverend Ralph E. Williamson, I want to thank Alan Feldman, who's going to be our timekeeper and our question person. I want to thank Pat, who is always taking care of the Zoom and who is our maven for everything IT. I want to thank Leroy Wood for suggestion of the Reverend Williamson to be here with us. And before we get started with the program, we're going to take 2 to 3 minutes to make a moment of reflection with Jean Lepovsky. Thank you, Jean.
Okay, so I hope everybody can hear me. If not, let me know. I want to talk about our Mexican roots. This is what Mexico looked like in the early days of the United States. You can see that it was about the same size as the United States and stretched well into territory that is no longer part of Mexico. And how that happened is there was a war, which is called the Mexican-American War. It started in 1846 and went to 1848, a short war. The direct causes of the war was that Texas, which was part of Mexico, became independent of Mexico, and that was in 1836. And then the US annexed Texas. Texas was a slave state. This happened in 1845. And as you might recall from your history classes, there was a lot of discussion about slavery and slave states and which states should be slave states and which should be not slave states. And so that was something that delayed the annexation of Texas by the United States. There was also a border dispute with Mexico. That was probably what you would call the proximate cause about whether the border should be at the Rio Grande or at the Nueces River, which was a little farther north. There were also the underlying issues, one of which, as I mentioned already, is the power struggle between the slave states and the free states for control of the Senate. And then the issue of manifest destiny, which is an ideology that said that the US has a God-given right to expand our republic from one ocean to the other, from sea to shining sea. So the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was the end of the war. The Mexicans were vastly overpowered by the United States. As a result of this treaty, Mexico gave up all claims to Texas, recognized the Rio Grande as the US southern boundary, and it also paid Mexico $50 million and agreed to settle all claims of US citizens against Mexico. And the thing I want to point out is that in addition to all of this, the United States acquired over 500,000 square miles of territory that included the states of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. So most of the what we consider the Western states, and maybe all of what we consider the Western states, were once part of Mexico. Something that we tend to forget when we think about Mexico, and we think about Mexicans crossing the Rio Grande, but actually that used to be part of their country. And here's a map that shows the current states of our republic, and it shows in green that part of the land that was once part of Mexico. And the impact of this Mexican-American War was that our country nearly doubled in size and the size of its territory. By taking the Mexican territory, it added to a problem related to slavery as free states and slave states, the slave states in brown and the free states in blue above them. And then there's all this extra territory and the question of what to do with that land. So the next thing that happened, well, actually right before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, gold was discovered in California. And so quite promptly, California became a state because there was all that gold. And then after another decade or so of increasingly acrimonious political wrangling, slave states seceded from the Union, and that began the Civil War.
Okay, well, let's us go on with the program. And I guess next time when somebody tells me there are already too many Mexicans in the United States, I'll just say, we're just coming back home, darling. So let me now take the time to introduce just a little bit about Reverend Ralph E. Williamson, otherwise known as Pastor Ralph. And before we begin, I want to say that unfortunately our club's president, Sue Deering, couldn't be here today for this recording, but she sends her love to all of you, all of us. So Reverend or Pastor Ralph served as senior pastor of First AME Church, Las Vegas for 16 years before coming to Orange County to serve at COR, C-O-R, or Christ Our Redeemer Church here in Irvine. While in Las Vegas, Pastor Williamson spearheaded a long line of social justice, criminal justice, racial and economic justice initiatives through his nonprofit organization, Faith Organizing Alliance. During his first year in Orange County, Reverend Williamson organized a unity march and rally against racism and injustice on June 13, 2020, which brought together 2,000 people from various organizations and communities, including some residents of Laguna Woods. In his talk entitled A Time of Transformation of Our Culture, Pastor Ralph will speak about disparities between the Black and white communities in areas like healthcare. He will also address how we actually transform our society and what we can do to help. So here we go. Please, Pastor Ralph, we can't wait to hear you.
All right. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the Laguna Woods Democratic Club and you, Alan Feldman, for the opportunity, the extended invitation that was made. I want to thank you, Rebecca, for giving me a wonderful introduction. Thank you. And I just want to say to each and every one of you, and Jean, I don't want to forget the overview, the recap of Mexico. We often forget how much of the territory that is here in the United States now that we call the United States of America, that belonged once to Mexico itself. So thank you, Jean, for that moment of reflection. Again, I am honored and I'm privileged, first of all, to be the pastor, of Christ Our Redeemer AME Church here in the city of Irvine, California. And I'm honored to be here as your guest speaker. I want to talk just for a few moments on a time for change and a time for transformation of our culture. Before COVID-19, my good friend, Rabbi Sandy Axelrod, and I were sharing in a conversation over breakfast one morning in Las Vegas, where I lived before coming to Orange County. I was asked by Rabbi Sandy if I believe it was time for change, for a change. We were both discussing the notion of retiring and moving on to our next adventure in life. We have both served in the city of Las Vegas for many years together on several committee. We worked together and doing various events on social justice. And Rabbi Sandy had a very thriving congregation, and I was proud of my own accomplishments. However, I made the mistake of saying I would like to get one more chance at seeing if I could do what I was successful at doing in Las Vegas once again. Building a church and uniting a community around many issues I believed were essential to the people I so loved. Shortly after that conversation, I received a new assignment in November 2019 from my bishop, assigned to me to become the new pastor of Core Church here in the city of Irvine, California. Be careful of what you ask for. In January of 2020, 3 months after I had just been reassigned to this city, the whole world was turned upside down, and everyone was feeling the impact of the devastation from the COVID-19 pandemic that continues today. Here I was in a new city for just a few months, surrounded by a new congregation who did not know me, and I did not get a chance to know them. In the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic, I found myself in a new environment. It was not exactly the kind of change or transformation I was looking for. While so much has changed, the world as we know it in today's context is still inundated with many serious problems that are destroying the moral fabric of our society at every level. Illegal drugs, gangs, activity, murder, suicide, child abuse, and human trafficking are just a few of the many challenges that impact our lives. In addition, we are affected by other social, political, economic, and environmental problems. There are challenges we face with the impact of the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline is a process through which students are pushed out of schools and into prisons. In other words, it is a process of criminalizing youth. The process is carried out by the disciplinarian policies and practices within schools that put students into contact with law enforcement. Once they are put into contact with law enforcement for disciplinary reasons, many are then pushed out of the educational environment into the juvenile and criminal justice system. The evidence shows that the school-to-prison pipeline primarily captures and affects Black students, which mirrors the overrepresentation of this group in America's prisons and jails. There are more Black men in our prison systems than we have in schools of higher learning. African American men are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. The percentage of young African American men in prison is nearly 3 times that of Hispanic men and almost 7 times that of white men. In addition to this challenge, we face with the school-to-prison pipeline problem and the high disproportionate incarceration of African American men, there are also disadvantages through the healthcare system, which compared to their white counterparts, African Americans are generally at higher risk for heart disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, and COVID-related disease and illnesses. As an African American pastor and community leader, I have a moral and a spiritual responsibility to promote and advocate for transformation and for change. When there is injustice and disparity in the community, especially the community I serve, it is evident from everything I just talked about that our education, prison, and healthcare system are broken. I have a spiritual and a moral responsibility to advocate on behalf of those who are voiceless, those who have been placed in situations, sometimes not in and of themselves, a problem that was created by them. The picture I'm trying to paint is a response to the question asked if I believe it was time for transformation or for a change. Yes, it is time for transformation, a change it is overdue. While at first the change or the transformation appeared to be over changing careers and moving on with retired life, the more I ponder the problem of our nation and the disparity with people of color, especially among African Americans, the reality began to seep in that the change that was heavy on my heart was how the people I loved and valued. Every person needs to know that they are valued. Placing value on individual needs and concerns for this pastor is imperative. The value must be set on those who have lost hope and are often marginalized. When the focus is on individual needs and concerns with the proper support and solution, we can bridge the gap between where there are so many disparities in our communities and transform our nation. Meeting individual needs will change negative perceptions and produce positive images of how people are viewed and accepted in our world today. A good pastor, to which I am seeking to become, looks beyond the statistics and the proliferation and attempts to bring solutions to the problems of the community they serve. No matter how challenging the task, the problem and differences can be resolved through what I call is SAGE, SAGE. Finding meaningful solutions, alternatives, and giving people the kind of guidance that empowers them. A basic premise described in Maslow's hierarchy of need is belongingness and love. Because people are social beings, they have a need to belong and be accepted. After individuals begin to satisfy their need to belong, they generally want to be more than just members of their group. They also want to feel valued in the society in which they live. The goals and objective of SAGE, of changing and situations and finding alternatives, ways that will guide and empower individuals, become the driving forces that motivates people into action. My goal is not only to strengthen the spiritual life of those in the church, but to formulate collaborative partnerships to help educate, restore, and heal a community of people beyond the walls of the church, especially those wounded by our society, social, political, and economic impact. In Sun Park's book, From Hurt to Healing, he discussed that in our society, there are people who are dealing with deep wounds that have not been healed. When people's deep wounds are not healed, the wounds become vortex of trouble, intertwined with their own instinct of survival and fear. While this will not be an easy task of dealing with the institutional problems of transforming the lives of individuals and systems that are deeply rooted in our society, it presents excellent possibilities and opportunities. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood the value of building the spiritual soul of humankind and building communities that united people towards a common cause. No man is an island. Although we are individuals, we must seek the common good. Where there is hurt, pain, and suffering, we are responsible for providing solutions that will help heal and bring about transformation. One size does not fit them all. This is a concerted effort. The success of SAGE can only be accomplished by a shared community, an established working relationships with local, county, and state agencies, civic and organization, businesses, schools, and nonprofit faith-based institutions, fraternities and sororities, and foundations that make up the fabric of our community. Unfortunately, these relationships must become the supporting cast that produces the desired results in helping to transform our society in an effort to eliminate so much inequality. The condition of being unequal, lack of equality, disparity, or in inequality of size or social or economic disparity between the rich and the poor. How do we stop widening? How do we prevent widening the income inequity in America? And as stated earlier, unequal opportunity or treatment resulting from the disparity or inequality in our criminal justice system, in healthcare and education. So what I am presenting is SAGE. It's not a movement. It is just an acronym of defining what is needed. Solutions, positive alternatives, guidance, and empowerment. People need to know that there are solutions where positive alternatives are available, that they can be guided, and that it will help them to attain what they need to be empowered, to have healthy, successful lives. That's my conversation for you today. How do we transform a nation and to deal with a much needed change? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ralph. Alan, would you be so kind to choose the questions and start posing them to our friend?
I certainly will. Thank you very much, Pastor Williamson. Thank you very much. That give us a lot to think about. Before I start with the questions, somebody we neglected to thank at the beginning of this program for her contributions is Jennifer Williamson, who was very helpful to me in arranging this. So she's kind of the co-producer. So thanks to her. I want to make sure we got that. The first thing I have to ask you is something we talked about before you went on, when you asked to have your middle initial. When we spoke to Ralphie Williamson, you said there was a story behind that. So that's the first question. What's the story behind the E in your name?
Well, the story behind the E, and then I'll tell you what I normally tell people. The story behind the E is when I was serving in Okinawa, Japan, I ended up getting a set of orders that was sending me somewhere where I knew that I was transitioning out of the military, but yet they were sending me on another two and a half year assignment. And I learned to put my E in my name because there were always other Ralph Williamsons. And so I wanted to identify with, I wanted people to identify with me and not with someone else. So when people ask me, why do you use the name E or the letter E? I say E means how excellent is your name. Ralph E, how excellent is your name, all right? So that's the story behind it, okay?
Okay, that's one mystery solved. Thank you. Okay, and let's start with some of the questions that have been posted on chat.
Okay.
The first would be, what real opportunities do you see today to achieve a transformation of our society?
Well, the first thing I think the opportunities now is the cohesiveness of individuals sitting at the table and being willing to sit and have conversation. Transformation does not come about through any other means or method except for people sitting and talking about what are the needed things that has to be reformed that will bring about a desired result that will empower not just those individuals that are currently receiving the benefits of life, but those that have been underserved for so long. So we need to have conversation.
Excuse me, and I just I got from your talk it seems I want to make sure that I was hearing you correctly. You seem to feel that in order to serve individual people, we need a lot of group action. That our solutions are not going to come one person at a time. What we're going to need, we're going to need to fill in the people from the group. Is that true? You believe in group action?
Yeah, I believe in collaboration. I believe in community partnership. I believe in organization, team building. I believe that everyone has a voice at the table that can make a difference. Everyone, every group or every entity that makes up our society has to be involved in order to bring about transformation. We don't live in silos. All right. And so we need to be inclusive of all, and everyone needs to share in this challenge that we face about bringing about equity and finding meaningful solution and alternatives.
Let me ask you specifically about Orange County. I understand with the pandemic, of course, I'm sure a lot of the things you wanted to do, you haven't been able to do because of the pandemic. But in your efforts, how has your reception been in Orange County for the powers that be, the political forces? Orange County has a reputation, some of it deserves, some of it not, for being a bastion of conservatism, indeed reaction. Have you found that to be true?
Well, let me just say this. When I first came here, the doors were open. The invitations were presented. I found myself sitting at the table with Sheriff Barnes on many occasions, and I serve right now on one of his committees of faith-based economic interfaith council. I serve on the board there. I had the opportunity of sitting with prior Chief of Police Mike Hamill for the city of Irvine. Had the opportunity to sit with the current mayor, and while she was running for office, and invited her, and she was a part of one of our opportunities to address to address our congregation at one of the forums that we have. So the invitations have been open. I work in a segment of individuals in the community now, mostly pastors from different faith denominations that have opened the door. We have prayer circles. We've had interfaith opportunities to sit and to associate and to talk about some of the opportunities and change. So I don't see it as being a completely shut down community. I see it as being a community where there are opportunity to bring about change and a willingness from individuals, as I stated, that are looking for what are some of the answers, what can we do to help to make a difference. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity that is well been presented to me.
Well, let me ask you kind of the other side of that question. I'm sure you do meet resistance on some of your initiatives. How do you deal with that resistance? How do you deal with that resistance? And I know it's not a one size fits all, but you deal with just in general. How do you?
Well, following, let me see, the march that we had, the peaceful march we had back shortly after George Floyd's killing, we formed a social justice committee that had a number of town hall meetings, community forums, where we invited individuals from that was representing our legislation, that were representing our city and state government, that represented the institutions where the prisons, dealing with prison. We dealt with individuals that were in the law department, because all of those issues were relevant. And what we were looking for, we did not receive. We were looking for an opportunity where we could be a voice that will help to make decisions when there were issues that were relevant, especially to African Americans, but specifically people of color. While we didn't receive our overall objective, in having a steering committee or an oversight committee, but we did make gains by having the conversation and the issues put on the table where we were able to at least talk about it. So there are issues that were pushed aside for the moment, but it still lays open opportunity for further dialogue and opportunity to bring about change as long as we continue to come to the table.
You have to be talking before you can solve any problems. That's for sure. I want to ask you about something that you had mentioned in your talk, and that is the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah.
You kind of described it. You could describe it for us again briefly, what you think it is. And really, I guess my real question is if you could describe some of the ramifications on the community in general of the prison, mass incarceration, and the prison.
Well, you have to understand, first of all, it starts at a very young age. It starts at the ages of 2nd and 3rd grade, where individual kids, sometimes the environments are not conducive. The environments that they come out of, sometimes the schools that they are attending, are not conducive to the behavior of the child, and the activity of that child sometimes can be misread, and misinterpreted. And yet, instead of dealing with it appropriately or understanding the culture, the disciplinary action is one that creates the profile that literally creates the tension there, where that child now becomes, instead of being mentored or tutored or given the kind of help that is needed, they are disciplined. And then once children become disciplined, it becomes a cycle of discipline and their actions that eventually remove them out of the traditional school into behavioral or correctional schools that put them in that whole process of moving from one environment where they are no longer being educated into an environment that leads them directly into what we call the prison pipeline.
What kind of ramifications in general do you think that has on the community? What does that take away from the community?
Well, first of all, it takes away the identity of that individual. It devalues who that person is. It does not give that individual any hope that, that they are being recognized within the community as if they are being respected. And it also puts a blemish in what do you call, where biases are misrepresented, and the way people view and look at young people, especially our males that are coming out of the community. So it messes up the whole perception, of what the community really represents.
Thank you. Let me go to a kind of, I guess we call it a nationally focused question here. I wanted to ask you about critical race theory. Somebody posed a question. I'd like to know, number one, what you think of it, what you think it is, and what you think of it, and what you think about the opposition to critical race theory, or what people call critical race theory.
Well, part of what I would like to say on critical race theory is America has a history. And as we listen to what was being presented to us earlier by Janine on her moments of reflection, that is a history of a people that was a part of the American history. The African American have a history. Our history may not be what you wanted, what you would like for it to be in today's context, but the reality, there was some cruel things that took place in America. Slavery was cruel. Jim Crow was cruel. Lynching and dealing with the racism that we had to deal with and contend with. And to push it aside and say that you don't want to educate people and teach, about the social injustice and the hatred and the white supremacy that took place in America. I mean, that is totally wrong. So we need to tell our story, our history. If we're going to transform a society, then we need to make sure that we cover all of the issues, that are creating the challenges that we face from day to day. Part of what is taking place in our culture is not new. This is ingrained in our institution. And so, the only way to do that is to uncover the problem. You got to get to the root cause of the problem in order for you to bring light on it and to bring about transformation.
Why do you think there's so much opposition to it, or these people speak to opposition in opposition to it? Is it a misunderstanding of what it is, or is it just they don't want to hear about it? They don't want progress to be made.
Well, I think it's a combination of all. Okay, and I just think that we have the part of the challenge is, Alan, and I have to be honest with you, we have become so divisive. Okay, that it is hard for us to come to a common ground where we can sit and talk logically without feeling as if we are being threatened by what is needed and important. Okay, when you sit down and look at the whole social construct, okay, and understanding who we are as people, we all want the same things. We all want freedom. We all want peace. We all want our children to have the best kinds of education and the best opportunities, and we all want good health care. But when we are looking at the disparities and the root cause of these disparities that are taking place in our society, they didn't just happen. So we have to deal with the historical record in order to bring about change in today's context. And so there's a pushback. There is a false pretension that what took place in the past really doesn't matter. Okay, it needs to be pushed away, hidden, and not discussed. You can't deal with a problem until you get to the root cause. And I've said that a number of times, but that's the reality of where we are. And some people don't want to deal with some of their past hurts. Okay, regardless of if it's them on themselves, but it's a reflection of the race in which you happen to be a part of. We are all Americans, so let's deal with it as Americans, okay, so that we all can move towards having an equal and just society.
Yeah, I'm going to stay kind of national here for the next question. Also, somebody raised the issue of President Biden has promised to, and apparently is working towards, appointing a Black woman to the Supreme Court, the vacancy of the Supreme Court. So I guess the first part of this question would be simple. Do you think that will happen? That, whatever insight you might have on that. And number two, what do you think the reaction, what do you think the effect on the Black community would be to having a Black woman appointed to the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm looking at it. First of all, I do think Biden will be able to get his nominee into office. I think they'll be able to get it moved and passed, and they will get the Senate approval, and she will be appointed, to the court. So that's not an issue for me. And I really seriously think when we're looking at our judicial system, I'm looking at people making judgments that are going to benefit people regardless of their race, their creed, or their color. We need a balance to our judicial system. And so I believe having a Black woman on there will help to bring balance to the laws that need to be passed, that will help to move legislations, not legislation, but help to move issues that are being disputed that can't be resolved through legislation. And so I just think that having a Black woman there helps to bring balance to the courts, that will help us to be able to move forward. And it will help to benefit those and pacify those that are looking for someone that represents who they are, that are sitting on the judicial system. Simple as that.
And let me ask somebody else another question from chat. As a pastor, as a Christian pastor, what do you feel? What do you think accounts for the bastion of kind of not dissent, but opposition to progress, racial progress, economic progress? Seems to be the evangelical Christian church in the South. Why do you think that is? It seems that sometimes when I hear you speak and I hear other people speak, it's like you're almost not practicing the same religion. Do you feel that way?
Well, I preach out of the gospel of Jesus Christ that deals with social injustices. When you go and look in Jesus, when his proclamation, when he first came out of the wilderness, he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has called me. And he began to talk about a liberation theology, setting the captives free, okay, releasing the bonds of the people. So when I preach about liberation. I preach about removing the shackles, the bonds, those things that confine people and do not allow them the opportunity to excel and become who God created them to be. And then I look in the gospel according to Matthew when it talks about, and he looked upon the multitude and he saw them as sheep that were without a shepherd. And he said, the laborers are few. Okay. And he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So we're looking at a people that are scattered, okay, that are looking for hope. So where are those that are looking at the people and not their own political objective? Sure, everything now in today's context is political, but when politics super overrides the people, then I have a problem with that, because first of all, we can't serve God's people unless we are dealing with the hurt and the needs of those who have been cast aside, who have been rejected and suppressed. And so if your religion doesn't teach that, then I don't know what religion you are really practicing. But my religion talks about the least of them.
Okay, our time is starting to run out, so probably going to be maybe another 2 questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And the first one I want to ask, I'm going to ask you a very general question about education, just to get your thoughts on it. The education system as we have it today, do you feel with what's taught in schools and the way it has been politicized, what direction is it going? Is it a force for equality, or is it now becoming a force against equality?
Well, our education system is so political now that it is, first of all, I don't think anybody knows where we are going because of the divisiveness, because of the overshadowing points of views with the anger, that people are not really able to sit and discuss what is best for the child's welfare. So we're dealing with such a divisive or a divisive way of trying to satisfy problems that becomes angry, and people are angry. And I don't think we are finding the solution. So at this point, I don't know if we can ever resolve where we are going in our education system that is going to make a difference for those that we have been entrusted to as our young people.
Pardon me. Sorry. Do you think we basically need to jump what we have and start all over again? Do you think that would do the trick?
Well, I'm going to go right back to what I started out earlier. We need to come to the table and we need to sit and have conversation. We need to have conversation and put away all of the animosity, all of the angers, and find out what are the real solutions. What are the alternatives? Okay, what are the things that will give good guidance, that will empower people to make the right decisions?
I'm done. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask you about, I guess it's, well, you came from Las Vegas, where you formerly worked, and I did a little research, and according to what I saw, the population of people identified as Black in Las Vegas is about 16%.
Yeah.
In Orange County, people identify as Black is less than 3%.
Yeah.
And that here in Laguna Woods, that kind of mirrors that also. So how do you get your issues, the issues of your community? How do you get the issues of your community heard? How do you get your voice heard in a place where Black people are such a tiny minority? And really, when it comes to political power, well, 2% is 2%. Doesn't throw a lot of weight to people looking for votes. So what kind of an obstacle is that to you? How do you try to overcome that?
Well, again, collaboration, finding the right community partners that are willing to collaborate with you, that sees out of the same lens that you're looking through, that understands, okay, the need and are concerned for the social welfare and the social and care about the social injustice of all people. You do that by finding those that are sensitive, okay, to others, and that are not just focused on their own ideologies or their own mindsets, okay, that move people out of the element of having compassion. And so if you can find compassionate people, you will find that it does not matter whether you are Black or Hispanic or Asian, that you can sit and work together and you can come up with a common cause. Core Church serves as a center, but it doesn't serve as the only opportunity to bring about change. We work on trying to build those community relationships where people understand the need. And that is the method that we are going to pursue, okay, in order to have our voice heard and make sure the need of the people that I serve are being represented, okay? And that may invoke, just going through some hard times and some difficult moments and some pushbacks. But there are people out there, believe me, that have already united and voiced their support and concern for change, and that are in support of issues that I have addressed in my conversation.
Okay. Well, this is going to be the last question. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for joining us and being so patient with all the questions. We really do appreciate it. The last question, I guess, is kind of a simple one. As a person who has been working for social justice and equality for many, many years, are you optimistic? Do you think there's enough people of goodwill that we can sit down and talk to? Are you optimistic that we will, if not achieve equality and social justice, at least march on that path?
Well, let me just say this. My faith tradition is out of the Christian faith. And when I see that Jesus took 12 men and turned the world upside down, yes, I'm very optimistic.
Well, that's a good note to end on. So I Pastor Williamson, I will thank you very much personally. I appreciate so much you being here today, and appreciate very much what you said, what you talked to us about. And I want to thank you for agreeing to do this. And it was a pleasure to meet you, at least electronically in person. And I'll throw it back to Rebecca now.
Thank you, Al.
Well, thank you, sir.
Pastor Ralph, how can we thank you enough? If I can take a minute to sum up the points that made so much of an impact to me. First, the importance of history. Then about the jail pipeline that you explained what is happening there. Then you talked about the strength of compassion, how much we need to have conversations. And finally, something that very few speakers do, your truthfulness when you admitted that you don't have all the answers, but yet you have all the faith that we can do it. Yeah. We thank you so much. And by the way, our president, Sue Deering, is now with us, so she sends her love to you. And please come back anytime. We loved your talk, and now we also love you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for the opportunity that was presented to me by the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. May God bless you, and may the work continue.
Thank you.
Yours too.